Now, I know I'm going to sound unstable here, but in today's video, I want to explain to you guys how this teacher who tried to go into outer space but ended up dying in the process led us on this long, winding journey that brings us to where we are today, where we have rich billionaires going into outer space as their personal hobby, and I'll even explain to you why that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Stories told with Morgan Gold. With Morgan Gold, it's time for Stories Told.
Do you guys remember that summer a few years back when it seemed like you could not doom scroll the internet without seeing some sort of billionaire launching rockets and trying to orbit the Earth?
To all you kids down there, I was once a child with a dream. Now I'm an adult in a spaceship looking down to our beautiful, beautiful Earth.
Here, catch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you just have to wait for it. Who wants a Skittle? Yeah, well done!
Like, it actually made me nostalgic for a time when space was the final frontier and not just another evolution of a yacht measuring contest.
Armstrong is on the moon. Neil Armstrong, 38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon on this July 20th, 1969.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Neil Armstrong's moonwalk. That's the stuff. That was humanity at its peak.
Ignition. Burn away, Houston. Vector good.
We're burning flat.
That's flat.
Looks good, flat.
Space shot flight.
But hold up, let's return to the now, and this is what we've got. Captain Jean-Luc Bezos of the USS Starship Prime, strapping on a cowboy hat like he's a gosh darn Steve Miller song, and blasting off in some sort of rocket. Seriously, folks, this is what our space race now looks like.
Even with sublight travel, you could absolutely colonize the whole galaxy.
Like, how did we get to this place where giant leaps for mankind are now giant whatever the heck this is?
If we can do this, just imagine what you can do.
We've traded our awe-inspiring dreams for front row seats for the hobbies of ultra-rich dudes. And really, the kicker, we let this happen. But now I know you're probably gonna say,
But Morgan, how are you going to be blaming us for all of this? How is this all of our fault?
allow me to tell you a little story. So I remember this one afternoon really vividly when I was 5 years old. I was on the bus, and there were a couple of older kids talking about what had happened that day. You see, I was a kindergartner at El Martinez Elementary School in Marlborough, Connecticut, and earlier that day, our teacher had brought us together with a couple of other kindergarten classes, and we were all watching on one of those rolly cart TVs the space launch, because for weeks, my teacher had been talking about how the space program was going to be sending up a teacher for the first time ever. It was going to be the first time ever that like a normal person was going to go into outer space.
What are you most excited about?
Seeing the Earth from that perspective of that small planet, you know, it's such a big place here, but being able to look at it from a new perspective, and I hope I can bring that wonder and that excitement back to the students.
And we were all so excited.
3, 2, 1, liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
But just as we were watching the launch,
Space Shuttle mission is now on the way. This morning it looked as though they were not going to be able to get off.
they turned off the TV and took us out of the room really quickly, and we were kind of confused and we didn't really know what had happened.
Looks like a couple of the solid rocket boosters blew away from the side of the shuttle.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded, checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
But on the bus ride home that day, the older kids told us what had happened. Apparently, the space shuttle that the teacher was on had exploded, and everybody on the space shuttle had died.
Today is a day for mourning and remembering. This is truly a national loss. We mourn 7 heroes: Michael Smith, Dick Scobie, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe. We mourn their loss as a nation together.
Now, if you're somebody who was born in the 70s or earlier, you probably have even clearer memories of this event than I do. And for folks who were born a few years after me, you probably don't even remember this thing happening at all. But the explosion of the Challenger space shuttle was just this massive national tragedy. And like really the only other two events I can liken it to are these other big generational moments like the assassination of JFK or 9/11. And so yeah, for me personally, the Challenger space disaster always really held this like mythical place in my childhood because it really marked just a first time up close experience with death.
Space flight today really seems safe. We had a good example of that when NASA shut down the last one through the computer because one of the backup systems wasn't working.
You say it seems safe. A lot of people equate that with it also seems boring. NASA, of course, has a selfish interest in all this. I mean, they want to build up public support for the huge outlays that are necessary to keep the program going.
I'm also delighted that the teaching profession and students and the whole country is really going to benefit from this.
Interest in the U.S. space program had been on the decline, and so NASA really did need like a big PR lift. You know, they explored a number of options. Like they even looked at potentially sending the person who did Big Bird's voice up into space to get kids interested in space again. And then they ran this big national contest to look for a teacher who could be well suited for the space program.
The president said the first private citizen is going to be a teacher. I remember Steve saying, well, you've got to apply.
And I will argue it was that very event that led to billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson going out into space. And I know I'm gonna sound crazy when I say that, but please allow me to explain why.
CBS Television presents a special report on Sputnik 1, the Soviet space satellite.
Until 2 days ago, that sound had never been heard on this Earth. Suddenly, it has become as much a part of 20th century life as the whir of your vacuum cleaner.
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket.
The radio signal transmitted by the Soviet Sputnik.
Is it possible that it is transmitting a code? Yes, it's quite possible that it's transmitting a code, but we don't realize what the code is.
No social system is so interested in developing science as the socialist system.
Sir, what do you think about this achievement of the Russians?
We should find out what they're doing that we're not doing.
Well, I think Russia's accomplishments are greater than ours.
I doubt whether this was actually accomplished. I think it's a remarkable thing. My only regret is that we couldn't get there first.
Russia has in recent months been threatening nations who grant bases to America.
The course of United States policies in the competition with Russia has been severely shaken.
Sputnik. This tiny satellite, no bigger than a beach ball, made Americans very, very nervous.
Russia's getting into space really bothers me.
What about the vital question that everybody is thinking about? Why and how did the Russians beat us to the draw?
It meant the Russians, the only other true superpower in the world left standing after World War II, was ahead in exploring space, an exception to American exceptionalism. You know, the Cold War was this long period of tense rivalry and competition between the United States and the Soviet Union without direct military conflict. It was marked by political and ideological differences, the nuclear arms race, the death of Apollo Creed, Balboa versus Drago, Rocky IV. And Sputnik, this tiny little satellite beeping as it orbited the Earth, made Americans think,
we need to catch the heck up or else we're gonna be speaking communism real soon.
And you know, that response wasn't a bad thing. In the glimmering wake of Sputnik, America's gaze did turn skyward.
The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The space race was this high-stakes game played against the backdrop of the Cold War, setting the stage for what would really become NASA's golden era. The Apollo missions weren't just about planting flags and footprints on the lunar surface, but they were about asserting dominance and proving that democracy could triumph over socialism.
We went to the moon because we were at war. Sputnik was not just some orbiting spacecraft, it's a hollowed out intercontinental ballistic missile. They took out the warhead, put in a radio transmitter.
Space, the final frontier.
Space exploration permeated the American consciousness, spawning films, literature, an unshakable belief in progress. It seemed like we were on the right track, but this wasn't just a matter of national pride. It was a massive economic stimulus, a catalyst for technological advancement, and really a source of inspiration for several generations that would create these massive ripple impacts. The space race sparked a massive interest in math, in science, and engineering among Americans, especially the young folks.
You know, it was such an impact on history that space flight was actually going to continue. And we would be herded into the cafeteria when these things were on, or herded into the gymnasiums. And I got caught up in that excitement.
And everyone saw astronauts as heroes and space missions as these thrilling adventures. Kids started dreaming of working for NASA or inventing a new technology. It was a time when looking up at the stars made everyone think about science and how we really could make the world a better place. Even Jeff Bezos was a product of the space bug.
When I was 5 years old, I watched what you just rewatched, and it had a huge impact on me. None of that passion has gone away. This is me in high school, and I want to highlight this quote: "The Earth is finite, and if the world economy and population is to keep expanding, space is the only way to go."
Back then, it was common for kids to want to grow up to be astronauts and rocket scientists. These days, everybody seems to want to be a content creator, and the only real moonshots we're seeing are coming from stonk investors and Bitcoin bros. While there was a lot of optimism and it looked like the possibilities were endless for America, there was one major thing that hurt America's space travel momentum: the Vietnam War. Systemic racism? Urban decay? Social unrest? Changing social dynamics? Political scandals? Economic recessions? The energy crisis? Landing on the moon? You see, landing on the moon was eventually a detriment to the American space program. You see, there was so much energy and inspiration wrapped up in trying to make sure that the Russians didn't beat us to the moon and to make sure that our space program was better than their space program, that eventually we kind of lost our way and we lost our momentum. When America landed on the moon, that was like one giant American touchdown that put us way ahead on the Cold War scoreboard. And then on top of it all, America just kind of lost interest and got bored because we have really bad attention spans. And
Look at that silly kid. Oh, that's adorable. Oh my gosh, that's so adorable too. Look at all these kittens, they're so adorable. They can't keep their cats in a row. Oh, it's so adorable. Oh wait, what the heck were we watching again?
And eventually the Apollo missions became kind of commonplace, and it really wasn't only like the time that the Jim Lovell Apollo that got lost with the Tom Hanks movie, like that was like interesting for a minute, but it was more because we were scared for people. It really wasn't about the space exploration. And really, by the time the 80s rolled around, the Apollo programs had ended, and kind of what was going to be next for space travel was beginning to look a little bit more like a question mark.
The obvious next step after Apollo was to send people to Mars. What in fact happened was that we sent a few people to the moon, and then we didn't send anyone after that to the moon or Mars or anything.
We landed on the moon in 1969, and then not too long after that, we're going to be going to Mars, and then we're going to be creating colonies, and pretty soon people are going to be going on vacation out in outer space.
That was a thing that people thought and expected when we were like in the 60s and 70s, but it all sort of started to die in the 80s, which, coming back to Krista McAuliffe and the Challenger crew and the ill-fated Challenger mission, like all of that stuff stuff, that was so rooted in trying to rekindle American interest and get us motivated and interested in that next wave of space exploration. The Challenger disaster was a grim reminder of the risks involved, and it really shook the nation's confidence, further eroding enthusiasm for the space program. And ironically, all of this was happening at a time when the technology that was enabled through the space race became critically important to our civilization. The rise of the satellite and satellite launches, particularly in the 1990s and 2000s, was significant because it represented a new era in space use. During these decades, there was a substantial increase in the number of satellites orbiting the Earth, all driven by technological advancements and a demand, particularly from the telecommunications industry, as well as the broadcasting industry, as well as the Earth observation services. Like, all of these things were practical use cases for technology that was developed in the name of launching rockets and putting people up on the moon. By having this big audacious goal being chased by a government entity, you essentially had the creation of all of these technologies that helped further build up a whole host of businesses and industry and made a massive impact on all of our collective lives. I'm honestly not sure if it's accurate to say that that technology made our lives better, but there's no denying that a lot cooler things than just Tang came out of the US space program.
Energy Tang, for spacemen and Earth families.
Our world wouldn't function today without all of these satellites. In fact, the only way I could even upload this overly long YouTube video to all of you folks was by using the satellites that bring internet here to my rural home. And so it's very ironic to me that at the same time of all this innovation and progress with satellite technology, NASA was struggling so mightily.
Houston, we have a problem.
But for me, NASA's struggles were really kind of a problem of their own making, too. First off, the Rogers Commission, which was the panel that Reagan had formed to investigate the cause of the Challenger disaster and figure out what happened and what went wrong. Well, that whole investigation ended up making NASA look like a whole bunch of giant boobs.
We learned that little things that seem harmless can become catastrophic events.
And yes, the actual reason that the whole shuttle exploded was because of a leaky O-ring. The same reason why my water hydrant leaks on cold days is actually what caused the shuttle to explode. Second, while the shuttle program was meant to provide this affordable means for getting up and down from Earth and going into space and make it just like a normal routine thing, there were just all sorts of problems and overruns in cost. And then by the time the 2003 Columbia disaster happened, Americans were just kind of done with the whole program. And just a side note here too, it's kind of shocking to me that the Columbia disaster happened 17 years after the Challenger disaster. And the truth of the matter is, when you look at really all of our aerospace technology, it's shocking just how old all of this stuff is and how little development and advancement there has been. This problem of a lack of development in aerospace technology isn't unique just to the space program. It really goes throughout the aviation industry too. If you want to confidently fly on an airplane, don't start Googling when your plane was designed, built, or the age of our air traffic control infrastructure. It really will make you want to take the train.
You're rich, and so you bought a private jet, but you're afraid of flying, so you just drive in it.
But truth be told, a big reason why we haven't had much progress in aerospace developments in recent years is because we've just had way different priorities.
My fellow citizens, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Do you guys remember that time that we fought a 20-plus year of global war against terror? That experience sucked a lot of oxygen out of the room for the space program. Just think about how different the world would be if the estimated $8 trillion that was spent by the United States to fight that global war on terror after 9/11, just even half of that was spent on, say, improving the space program. We would be living in a dramatically different world right now.
When Carol Phillips wants to know what's going on in her community, she takes a walk to the computer in her family room.
I think the other obvious main priority that really came up and pushed the whole space program aside is just how powerful and important that computers and the internet have really become and how they've taken over our world.
Imagine a world where every word ever written
Every picture ever painted and every film ever shot could be viewed instantly in your home.
How everything's connected, how we walk around with these computers in our pocket.
It spans the globe like a superhighway. It is called Internet.
If you look at the space program in this context, is it really all that surprising that a dude who got rich from an internet bookstore or a weirdo who was a part of the PayPal mafia are now the leading players in America's new private space programs?
Come on, Jeffrey, you can do it. Pave the way, put your back into it.
The Earth has felt big to us. And actually, in a really correct sense, it has been big. Humanity has been small. That's not true anymore. The Earth is no longer big. Humanity is big.
I went to Russia to look at buying a refurbished ICBM, which is a very trippy experience.
We will run out of energy on Earth. This is just arithmetic. It's going to happen. If we move out into the solar system, we have unlimited resources.
A future where we are a spacefaring civilization is inspiring and exciting compared with one where we are forever confined to Earth until some eventual extinction event.
And it's this generation's job to build that road to space so that the future generations can unleash their creativity. Big things start small.
Jeff Bezos has become $77 billion richer during this horrific pandemic.
The richest and most powerful people in the world are turning their eyes away from the planet into the stars.
This is really a public-funded flight, the amount of millions that he saved in not paying taxes.
Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, Mommy, I don't want to live on Earth anymore. It's dirty and it's full of pathetic little millionaires. I want a shiny new planet and a bigger one than Elon had.
Meanwhile, at the Billionaires Space Club,
Think about it, Jeff. We are essentially on a spinning ball just floating, and we're here making more balls to float around in.
Exactly, and everyone's worried we're just filling our pockets, but our aspirations are bigger than that. We got goals for the humans.
Exactly. We're effectively like cosmic gardeners, spreading humanity's seed across the universe, like we're essentially in that Root song. Most people won't get that joke.
Tycoons in the 19th century were focused on trivial things like philanthropy and charity. This is much greater than anything Andrew Carnegie ever did.
But seriously, think about the tech we're developing. Renewable energy, advanced materials, even artificial intelligence. We're all pushed forward by our quest to the stars.
It's like we're not escaping Earth. We're saving it, making it a part of something bigger.
It's hard to see this billionaire space race as being anything other than an ego-driven competition between very rich men.
And they are heavily reliant on public contracts, even as they claim that they are private companies and this is entrepreneurial.
Why was NASA bringing cargo to the space station? If NASA is going to be a frontier agency, you bring in corporations to do the routine things what they can do efficiently. SpaceX brought up some supplies to the space station. Banner headlines, new era in space. What will happen next? Will private enterprise lead? They just took cargo to the space station.
The transition towards a private sector involvement in space is also going to be critical if it's ever going to become a thing that we really do on the regular. Companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are pioneering new technologies and reducing the cost of space travel. Their actions lay the groundwork for futures where space exploration and settlement are viable and sustainable reality. You know, even if you're thinking about the things like space stations, you're going to ultimately need companies doing routine work. And so while you might not like having a SpaceX or Blue Origin out there, they are doing good things.
That is a contradiction.
So is it a sign of late-stage capitalism that we have billionaires making space exploration their hobby? Yes. But is it simultaneously a good thing too? Also, yes.
We need to question, we should be dedicating so much resources to this kind of grand vision of a future when we're dealing with so many crises in the here and now.
We have a poem here. It's called Whitey on the Moon. It was inspired by some whiteys on the moon. A rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon.
The question really remains, what is the role of space exploration in a world that's grappling with earthly challenges? Like, I know I'm over here all rah-rah about space exploration and saying America needs to do more to explore outer space and all that sort of stuff.
Whitey's on the moon.
We have so many problems here on this planet. People who don't have homes, people who don't have health care. Like maybe that's where we should be putting our time and attention and money.
I can't pay no doctor bills, but Whitey's on the moon.
And the folks that are going to levy those critiques are not necessarily wrong in the fact that we need to be investing more in those things.
The man just upped my rent last night because Whitey's on the moon.
My point is just that when you really look at the role of the space program, it does some important things for us as a society that are much more forward-looking. And while, yes, putting a person on the moon or putting a teacher into outer space and having regular trips back and forth into orbit, like all of those things are interesting. I get that they don't actually have a direct daily value to any of us. But if I think about what if we had taken the last 20 years to invest more in the space program we could have accomplished, or where we'd be from a lot of technological factors. I mean, does investing in figuring out how to put people on Mars create a better way to travel here on Earth? Does it help us come up with ways to extract clean water out of something that's already polluted, or figure out a way to create more renewable sources of energy? Like all of those things could be potential byproducts of an investment in space programs. And I feel like the people who are making this a numbers argument are really being short-sighted, and they're really allowing themselves to be misdirected.
First of all, let's clarify what the NASA budget is. The bank bailout, that sum of money is greater than the entire 50-year running budget of NASA. The distribution of money that you're spending is warped. You are removing the only thing that gives people something to dream about tomorrow.
The money that's being spent up there is really one of the greatest investments we could ever make in the 7 billion of us living down here.
Skytrain maneuver has started. About 20 meters off the surface. Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars.
This is the very first image of Mars from NASA's Perseverance. The rover landed on the red planet today.
At this point, I really should address the elephant in the room: NASA's unmanned exploration. While robotic missions like Mars rovers and the Voyager probes have delivered invaluable scientific insights, pushing the boundaries of our understanding of the universe, they lack the human touch that captures and retains the public's attention and excitement.
Yo, did that dude just diss the Hubble telescope?
This isn't a shortcoming of the mission themselves, but rather a reflection of what inspires humanity on a fundamental level.
The reason people are interested in humans traveling in space is because they can die. That's what makes it interesting, and you want to see if they're going to die.
Humans are inherently drawn to stories and experiences that reflect their own potential for adventure, discovery, and overcoming challenges. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin set foot on the moon, it wasn't just a triumph of engineering and science, but it really was a moment to be proud of being a human being, and it ignited imaginations and created inspiration. This connection is diluted by unmanned missions, no matter how groundbreaking the science behind them may be, no matter how groundbreaking the insights that might come from them are. Look, if there's anything that the Challenger disaster taught us, it's that space exploration can be dangerous, and so it probably is smarter to send up robots. There's a reason classrooms are filled with posters of astronauts, but not as often with rovers and satellites. That human connection inspires future generations to pursue careers in STEM, driving the cycle of innovation and exploration. This level of inspiration and engagement is difficult to achieve when you're just sending robots up there.
Think of what the future's going to be like. We're going to be able to live in a space station. We're going to be out on maybe another planet. I mean, we even at that point thought that maybe Mars was able to be inhabited.
So now you've made it entirely to the end of this video, and you're still not quite seeing all the connections between the Challenger disaster and Billionaires in space. So please allow me to take a moment to draw that line for you very, very crisply. America's national space program had a lot of momentum, and although that momentum was beginning to wane prior to the Challenger disaster, it really was the Challenger disaster that tipped it over the edge. That meant that when things like the satellite boom of the 90s and 2000s started to spark up, it really was private organizations that took the helm. And as we had the rise of the ultra-billionaire class at the turn of the century, that created a new group of people who were ready to step in and fill the void that had been created by NASA. And so I'm not going to say that I genuinely believe that we wouldn't have billionaires in space if the Challenger shuttle had gone up and come down and Krista Bacalov was out barnstorming the country in the 1980s talking to kids about the importance of space exploration. There are so many variables at play that I don't think I could ever accurately answer that question. But I most definitely do see a strong connection between those two events. And if anything, my true hope by talking about all of this is that maybe I've gotten some of you more interested in the importance of space exploration and where we as a humanity go next. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I had a blast making it. If you want to learn some more stuff and watch another video, you should check out this one right here. And don't forget to subscribe, because I'll be back again real soon telling some more stories. Thanks for watching, everybody.